Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bookercast, the podcast where books come to life.
And I'm so excited to dive into another amazing story with all of you.
Whether you're a bookworm or just love a good story, this is the place for you.
Every episode, we explore incredible books, talk about their stories and characters, and share insights that'll make you fall in love with reading all over again.
All right, let's not keep you waiting any longer. Get comfortable, and let's jump right into it.
Sounds good.
All right, let's dive into ancient Rome, but not your typical history lesson this time. We're going to be talking about Santiago Posteguillo's Damn Rome. Now, this is historical fiction, so, fictional story, but set against a real historical backdrop.
And what's really cool about historical fiction is how it lets you explore the past, get those insights, but it's also emotionally engaging at the same time,
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing today. Uncovering all the political and personal dramas that shaped ancient Rome, seeing how Posteguillo brings them to life, and maybe even think about what it all means for us even today.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
Let's set the stage a bit first. You think ancient Rome, you probably picture those marble statues, grand architecture.
Yeah, like something out of a movie.
Right. But it was also this cutthroat world, ruthless ambition, alliances changing all the time.
Totally. These weren't just names in a textbook, right? I mean, Caesar, Pompey, Crassus, these guys were masterminds playing this high-stakes game for power.
And Posteguillo captures that perfectly. You know that story about Caesar being captured by pirates, the Cilician pirates?
Oh, yeah.
So he gets kidnapped, sets this crazy high ransom for himself, and then, get this, he hunts them down and has them crucified. Talk about holding a grudge.
Yeah, what always struck me about that story wasn't just that he set his own ransom, which is, pretty audacious in itself, but the sheer brutality of the punishment.
Yeah.
It just seems so, out of proportion.
It does, and I think that was intentional on Posteguillo's part. Right off the bat, Caesar is this complex figure, super ambitious, clearly capable of being unbelievably ruthless. But it also kind of hints at what was normal in Roman society back then. They weren't exactly a culture that shied away from violence,
Yeah, that's a great point. It makes you think, how much of Caesar's ruthlessness was just him, his personality, and how much is just how Romans did things back then?
It's a great question. And that whole episode with the pirates, it's like this microcosm of Caesar's character, He takes this setback, being kidnapped, and turns it into an advantage, uses any means necessary to get what he wants. That resilience, and maybe even a thirst for vengeance, you kind of see that driving him through the whole book.
Speaking of resilience, we got to talk about Spartacus. A gladiator leads a slave rebellion that shakes Rome to its core. That's incredible. Talk about defiance, going up against a system that was basically designed to crush them.
And what's so powerful about that story, Spartacus's story, is that it forces you to look at the underbelly of Roman society. We tend to focus on emperors and senators, all the glamorous stuff. But Roman power, it was built on the backs of slaves. And Posteguillo doesn't shy away from that. He actually gives a voice to the people who were usually silenced.
Right. It makes you realize all that grandeur, all that fancy stuff in Rome, it came at a terrible cost. And Spartacus and the rebellion, even though it failed in the end, it was like this testament to just wanting freedom, wanting a better life, no matter how bad things are.
Yeah, it's a spark of resistance. Really reminds us of the power dynamics at play. How even that powerful structure could be challenged, could be fragile, when there's that much discontent bubbling beneath the surface.
It makes you think. And then we have the first triumvirate, right? Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus sharing power. Or at least they're trying to. Seems like a recipe for disaster from the start.
It was an alliance born out of necessity, but man, fueled by ego and ambition. Each one of those guys had their own agenda, their own vision for Rome, right? And that tension, that constant struggle for dominance, even within the alliance, that's what makes it so interesting. Just this study of how power works,
Reading about them, it reminded me of, political alliances today, often presented as this united front. But, you always wonder what those individual ambitions are simmering under the surface.
Exactly. Posteguillo really exposes those hidden agendas. Power is rarely shared equally, or willingly for that matter. And those competing desires, those ambitions within a united front, well, the consequences can be pretty devastating. Just look at how the first triumvirate ends. Rivalry, and eventually all-out civil war.
And that's one of the things Posteguillo does so well. He doesn't just tell us about these events, he throws us right into them. His descriptions are so vivid, it's like you can smell the dust of the arena, hear the swords clashing.
He uses such amazing sensory language. It's like ancient Rome comes alive. It's so immediate, so real. That's one of the things that makes Damn Rome such a gripping read. It's not just history. It's like you're right there in that world he's created.
You know, what really struck me is that he describes not just the big battles, the political speeches, but also, like, daily life for Romans from all walks of life. You get to see the markets, the rituals, even just quiet moments of family life, you know?
And that's so important for understanding how complex this world really was. It's not just togas and Senate debates. He gives you the sights, the sounds, even the smells of ancient Rome. It's like a sensory immersion course in Roman history.
Like, there's this one scene where he describes a feast in such detail. The food, the decorations, the music, the conversations. You can practically taste the wine, hear the laughter. It's not just a party. It's this whole glimpse into Roman culture, their hierarchy, how extravagant the elite were.
Yeah, and that attention to detail, it extends to the characters, too. We're not just reading about historical figures. We're meeting them, like, as people. They have hopes, fears, motivations.
Exactly. And it's not just from the perspective of the powerful either, right? We hear from generals, slaves, senators, even women like Cornelia, Caesar's wife. You see the same events through so many different eyes. Makes the story so much richer and more nuanced.
It's like he's saying, hey, history's not just about who wins, it's about everyone who lived through these crazy times.
And by weaving all those perspectives together, you get a much more complete picture of Roman society. One that recognizes everyone's contributions and also their struggles, people from all walks of life.
Absolutely. And he doesn't shy away from the brutality, the injustice that was built into Roman society.
Yeah.
The plight of slaves, the exploitation of the poor, the way women were treated. It's all there.
It brings this rawness, this honesty to the story that I think is missing from a lot of traditional history books. It's like a reminder that history isn't just dates and battles. It's about real people whose lives were shaped by things outside their control.
It really is. And somehow, Posteguillo manages to do all this while keeping you completely hooked on the story. He's a master of pacing and suspense. Political intrigue, betrayals, epic battles, it's all woven together in this way that keeps you on the edge of your seat.
Like a historical thriller. The stakes are incredibly high. Everyone wants power. But it's also a deeply human story. Makes you think about ambition, the complexities of power, and, yeah, that enduring allure of Rome, you know?
And that's exactly what we're going to keep exploring as we dive deeper into Damn Rome.
So stay tuned as we uncover more about the political games, the betrayals, the triumphs, the tragedies that shaped this era. And hey, maybe we'll even see how some of these ancient events resonate with our own world today.
You know, thinking about the book, one of the things that really stuck with me was how Posteguillo handles betrayal. It's like woven through the whole story. And it's not just the obvious stuff, the backstabbing, the political maneuvering. It goes deeper than that.
Yeah, I see what you mean. There are these moments of betrayal that are almost, I don't know, Shakespearean in how tragic they feel. Like when Sertorius, the Roman general fighting a rebellion in Hispania, gets betrayed and assassinated by his own men.
Oh, man, that scene. Heartbreaking. And I think what makes it so powerful is how Posteguillo shows us Sertorius, you know? He's this brilliant strategist, a leader who actually cares about his soldiers, but then he's completely undone by the people he trusted most.
It really makes you think, anyone, even the most capable, well-intentioned people, they're still vulnerable to the ambition and treachery of those around them.
For sure. Makes you wonder who you can really trust, especially when power is involved. And that betrayal with Sertorius, it highlights something else that's key in Damn Rome, that blurry line between ambition and just being ruthless.
And speaking of ambition, we can't forget Pompey. He's often shown as Caesar's rival, right?
Yeah.
The defender of traditional Roman values. But when you look closer at how Posteguillo portrays him, he's much more complex.
Way more. He's not just this, like, by-the-book traditionalist. Pompey, he's also driven by this need for glory, for recognition. And he's definitely not afraid to play the political game, you know, to get ahead.
Yeah, I found it interesting how Posteguillo shows us how Pompey wants the people's love, but he's also totally willing to use these kind of shady tactics. Like he wants it both ways, to be seen as this virtuous leader, but also pulling strings behind the scenes.
It's that contradiction, that inner conflict that makes him so fascinating. And it shows the hypocrisy that often comes with power, right? Leaders talk about these high ideals, but then they do things that totally go against those principles.
It's a tale as old as time, I guess.
Hmm.
And his rivalry with Caesar, that's obviously a huge part of the story. They're both incredible strategists, but their approaches to power are so different.
Yeah, it's like a clash of styles, right? Caesar's bold, charismatic versus Pompey's more calculated, traditional approach. But at the core of it, it's about dominance. They both want to be the one shaping Rome's future.
And that's what makes those clashes so compelling. It's like watching a chess match, where every move has these huge political implications tied up with personal ambition and this deep understanding of how the other guy thinks.
And I think Posteguillo captures that back and forth, that intellectual sparring, so well. It's not just about brute force or who's got the bigger army. It's strategy, manipulation, understanding how power really works.
And it's fascinating how he shows us their public image, too. They both get how important it is to win over the masses, to control the narrative.
Oh, yeah, totally. Public perception was everything in ancient Rome. It's like almost a precursor to how media and propaganda work today. They stage these elaborate games, build public works, give rousing speeches, all carefully crafted to win over the people.
Makes you think about how politicians, throughout history really, they've used those same tactics to get power, to hold on to it.
It does. Makes you question what leadership really is, the role of public image. Is it even possible to be truly virtuous when you're playing the political game? Or is it all just a performance?
And damn, Rome doesn't shy away from the dark side of this power struggle either. People die, families are torn apart, and Roman society itself is threatened by these competing ambitions.
It's a sobering reminder that pursuit of power, it often comes at a huge cost, both for individuals and for society as a whole.
But even with all the political scheming, the battles for power, Posteguillo never loses sight of the human element. He blends those personal dramas, the relationships, right alongside these huge historical events.
He really does. Love, loss, loyalty, betrayal. They all play out on the smaller scale, which adds so much depth, so much emotion to the story.
Like Caesar's relationship with his wife, Cornelia. She's smart, strong-willed, she supports his ambition, but she challenges him too.
Yeah, and when she dies, it's a huge turning point in the book. It's obviously a personal tragedy for Caesar, but it has these massive political repercussions too. He becomes even more hardened, more ruthless.
It's a powerful reminder that even in ancient Rome, life was precarious. Even the powerful weren't immune to loss, to violence, to, well, death.
And that feeling, that fragility, it's not just about individuals. Posteguillo constantly shows us that the Roman Republic itself is this delicate thing, threatened from within and outside.
It makes you realize that even with all the grandeur, all the military might, the Roman world was walking a tightrope.
Exactly. And that's what makes Damn Rome more than just a historical novel. It's about human nature, the complexities of power, and this constant struggle between ambition and what's right, what's virtuous.
And he manages to capture the essence of this whole era with all his contradictions in a way that's both captivating and really insightful.
One thing that I thought was particularly fascinating was how he shows the women in Roman society. I mean, they're up against all these limitations, but Posteguillo really highlights their strength, their intelligence, how they find ways to exert influence even within those boundaries.
Oh, absolutely.
Eh.
We've talked about Cornelia, but then there's Caesar's mother, Aurelia. She plays a huge role in shaping his ambition, protecting his interest.
She's this incredibly shrewd and powerful figure. She operates in the shadows, but she knows how to wield her influence.
And then there's Servilia. Talk about navigating a treacherous world. She uses her cunning, her ambition, even manages to manipulate Caesar himself.
These women, they're not just sitting on the sidelines. They're active players in the game. They shape events. They influence outcomes, often in really subtle ways.
It reminds us that history is never simple. There are all these undercurrents, all these hidden agendas. And women, even with the limited roles they had in Roman society, they still found ways to have power.
Right. And that's one of the things that makes Damn Rome so captivating. Posteguillo goes beyond the surface. He reveals those complexities, those contradictions. He shows us the roles of the people who are often overlooked in traditional history books.
It's like he's saying, hey, look closer. There's way more to this story than you might think.
Exactly. And as we delve deeper into Damn Rome, we'll uncover more of those hidden stories. We'll see how all these complex characters, men and women, they all contribute to those moments of triumph and tragedy that defined Roman history.
You know, that's a great point to move on from. We've talked a lot about the political stuff, the betrayals, the personal dramas, but let's not forget about the setting itself. Posteguillo really brings ancient Rome to life.
Oh, absolutely. His descriptions are so vivid, so detailed. It's like you can practically feel the cobblestones under your feet, hear all the noise of the marketplace.
I was really struck by how he described the architecture in Rome, the port of Ostia, all those exotic goods coming in from across the empire and the street life, so many different kinds of people.
He doesn't just tell you about it, he transports you there. You can almost smell the incense burning in the temples, hear the roar of the crowd at the gladiator fights, taste the wine at those lavish banquets.
It's this immersive experience. It's more than just a history lesson. It's like you're there, walking those streets, watching these events happen right in front of you.
And it's not just the physical setting either. He gives you this glimpse into Roman culture, their beliefs, their customs, the whole social hierarchy. You get a real sense of what it was like to live in Rome during this crazy time.
It's this amazing blend of historical accuracy and imagination. He obviously knows his Roman history, but he also uses his creativity to fill in the gaps, bring these characters and events to life in a way that's both entertaining and informative.
Right. And it's not all just grandeur and spectacle. He doesn't shy away from the darker side of life in Rome. The poverty, the really rough living conditions, how slaves were treated, the constant threat of violence.
It reminds you that it wasn't all just marble statues and fancy clothes. It was a society dealing with serious social problems, corruption, and the pressure of this ever-expanding empire.
And those darker elements, I think they make the story even more compelling. He shows us the underbelly of Roman society. It creates this more nuanced and realistic portrait of the era.
It's that balance, the light and the dark, the triumphs and the tragedies, that makes Damn Rome so captivating, so thought-provoking.
Absolutely. And as we keep exploring the book, we'll dig deeper into those contrasting elements. We'll uncover the stories of both the powerful and the powerless, and we'll see the events that shaped the course of Roman history.
Now, you talked earlier about how Posteguillo blends historical fact with imagination. Can you say more about that? I'm curious how he balances those two things, the factual stuff with the fictional parts of the story.
He does it seamlessly, really. He clearly did his research. The historical events, the people, they're all portrayed accurately. But he also uses his imagination, right, to bring those events to life, to imagine the conversations, the motivations, the personal dramas that might have been happening behind the scenes.
So it's not just reciting historical facts. He uses fiction as a way to explore the human side of history, to understand the personalities and the emotions that drove these people.
Exactly. That's what makes historical fiction so cool. It connects us to the past on a deeper level. We understand not just what happened, but why it happened and how it affected real people's lives.
And he doesn't shy away from how complicated and ambiguous history can be. He acknowledges that there are different versions of events, that motives are often murky.
And that makes the story even more interesting. It's not about presenting this straightforward narrative. It's about getting the reader to question, to interpret, to come to their own conclusions.
It's like he's saying, here's what we know, but there are also all these unanswered questions, these mysteries about these figures and events. Now it's your turn to think critically.
I love that approach. It makes Damn Rome more than just an entertaining book. It makes you think about history in new ways.
It's history coming alive, not just dates and battles, but the lives and experiences of real people.
And through those individual stories, those journeys of triumph and tragedy, we can really understand those forces that shaped ancient Rome and, forces that are still at play in the world today.
We've focused a lot on the politics, the power struggles in Damn Rome. But there's another part that really resonated with me. How he portrays the slave revolt led by Spartacus. It's like a story within a story, and it shows us how brutal Roman society really was.
Oh yeah, definitely. Spartacus and the other gladiators, they represent everyone who was oppressed by the Roman system. Their rebellion, even though it was crushed, it shows how powerful that desire for freedom is. It's a universal human thing.
And Posteguillo doesn't try to sugarcoat it. He shows how brutal the conflict was, how desperate the slaves were, the overwhelming power of the Roman army.
But he also shows their courage, their brilliant strategy, their sheer determination to fight for something better, against all odds.
Spartacus becomes this almost mythical figure, a symbol of resistance, of hoping for a better life, even when it seems impossible.
His story, even though it's happening within this larger story about Caesar, it reminds us that history isn't just about emperors and politicians. It's about everyone who fought for their basic human rights.
It forces you to look at the dark side of all that Roman glory, right? The human cost of empire, how brutal life was for anyone who wasn't part of the ruling elite.
It makes you question the whole foundation of Roman power. If a bunch of slaves could pose such a serious threat, it means there were cracks in the system. It was built on exploitation and oppression.
It's like this reminder. Even the most powerful empires are built on shaky ground. They're vulnerable to unrest, to the anger of people who've been treated unfairly.
And that theme of social injustice, of the struggle between the haves and have-nots, it runs throughout damn Rome. It's not just about the slave revolt.
It's this thread that connects everything, the personal dramas, the political stuff, even the battles.
And that's a thread that's still relevant today. It reminds us of the fight for equality, for justice, in a world where power is often in the hands of just a few.
And talking about those personal dramas, Posteguillo really explores relationships, especially within families.
Yeah, he shows us how love, loyalty, ambition, they can all get tangled up, especially in a society where power is everything.
We've talked about Caesar's relationships with Cornelia and his mother Aurelia, but he also looks at other characters, how their personal motivations and conflicts shape what they do.
Like Pompey and his wife Julia, who's also Caesar's daughter, their relationship is fascinating. It's about love, but also political strategy.
Their marriage starts as this way to solidify the alliance between Caesar and Pompey, but then it becomes a real love story, kind of a bright spot in this world that's so focused on ambition and betrayal.
And when Julia dies, it's another turning point, like Cornelia's death. The balance of power shifts, and you can sense those tragic events that are coming.
It shows that even personal relationships can get caught up in politics, and how wanting power can have these devastating consequences, not just for the person seeking it, but for everyone they love too.
And Posteguillo handles those personal tragedies with such sensitivity, He shows how the choices these historical figures make affect not just them, but the people around them.
It adds another layer of emotion to the story, makes these historical figures more relatable, their struggles more real.
And it reminds us that even with all the big events of history, it's the individual stories, the connections between people, the personal losses that have the most impact.
Now, we spent a lot of time talking about what's in damn Rome, the themes, the ideas, but I want to come back to something you said earlier, Posteguillo's writing style. It's one of the things that makes this book stand out.
It really does. His writing is so vivid, so engaging. You get pulled into the story. You feel like you're there experiencing it.
The way he uses sensory details, it's amazing. He doesn't just tell you what's happening. He makes you see it, hear it, smell it, taste it.
It's a totally immersive experience. His descriptions are so rich, you can practically feel the sun on your skin, hear all the noise of the marketplace around you.
And the dialogue is great too. It's sharp, witty, and he really captures how these characters would have talked. Makes them feel real, even though they lived so long ago.
He's also great at building suspense. He knows how to pace a scene, to drop little hints, foreshadow what's coming, so you're always on the edge of your seat.
It's that blend of historical accuracy, imagination, and just beautiful writing that makes damn Rome so compelling, so memorable.
That's what makes historical fiction so powerful, I think. When it's done well, it takes us to another time, another place, and makes us think about the past in new ways and see the connections between the struggles of people back then and what we're dealing with today.
It reminds us that history isn't just a bunch of dates and battles. It's a story that's still going on, and we're all part of it.
And Damn Rome is a brilliant example of how to tell that story. It captures our imagination, challenges what we think we know, and leaves us with a deeper understanding of the past and how it's still relevant to us now.
You know, as we head into the last part of our deep dive, I think it's time to look at how damn Rome ends and talk about some of the lasting impacts of those events and themes we've been discussing.
Yeah, we can dig into the historical significance of Caesar's rise, what happened to the Roman Republic, and how Posteguillo's unique way of telling the story sheds light on this crucial moment in history.
And of course, we want our listeners to think about some big questions too. Questions about ambition, power, and the choices we all make that shape our lives. So stick around for more insights into the fascinating world of damn Rome. We've talked about a lot, ambition, betrayal, even got a glimpse into the lives of everyday Romans. But one thing that keeps coming back to me is how damn Rome doesn't shy away from, the ugly side of Roman society.
Yeah, it's not all glamorized, right? Posteguillo shows the poverty, the corruption, the violence that was just part of life back then.
Like there's this one scene, Caesar's walking through the slums, and he sees these kids fighting over scraps of food. It's a real gut punch, It shows how unequal things were.
That scene is so powerful because it's such a contrast to the wealth and luxury of the ruling class. Posteguillo isn't afraid to show us the underbelly of Rome, the human cost of building an empire.
It makes you wonder, was it all worth it, all that conquest, all that power, when so many people were suffering?
I think that's a question Posteguillo wants us to ask ourselves. He doesn't give us easy answers, but he makes us confront the messy reality of history. Even the most impressive empires are built on things like inequality and exploitation.
And it's not just the poverty, right? It's the corruption, too, especially among the people in charge.
Yeah, you see senators taking bribes, extorting people, even resorting to murder to get what they want. They'll betray anyone, their friends, their country, all for power.
It's like that saying, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. It makes you wonder, do these powerful people ever actually care about the people they rule? Or is it all about staying in power, getting ahead?
And it's not just the men either. The women in Damn Rome are shown as being just as capable of, well, doing whatever it takes.
We've talked about Aurelia, Caesar's mother, and all her scheming. But then there's Servilia, using her charm and intelligence to manipulate powerful men.
She's such an interesting character. Her story makes you think about the role of women in Roman society. Were they just pawns? Or did they find ways to have power, to make their own choices?
I think Posteguillo shows us it's kind of both. They were definitely limited by the rules of the time, but they still found ways to work within those limits and get what they wanted.
Which makes their stories even more fascinating. They were playing a different game, but the stakes were just as high.
And of course, we can't talk about Damn Rome without talking about the big picture, right? The fall of the Republic, the rise of the Empire. It feels like the whole book is leading up to this inevitable collapse.
Yeah, there's this sense of, like, impending doom hanging over the story. The political fighting, the social unrest, all the wars. It feels like the system is going to break down and there's nothing anyone can do about it.
And Caesar's right in the middle of it all. He's brilliant, ambitious, but he also breaks all the rules. He's the force that throws the Republic into chaos.
And Posteguillo shows us how complex Caesar is. He's a hero and a villain, a visionary leader and a power-hungry tyrant. You never quite know what to think of him, which makes him so compelling.
I know. I was constantly changing my mind about him. One minute I'm admiring him, the next I'm like horrified by what he's willing to do.
And I think that's the point, right? Posteguillo is showing us that history isn't simple. Even the most famous people are full of contradictions.
It reminds you that the past isn't just good guys and bad guys. It's this complicated mix of events and people, each with their own reasons for doing what they do, and their actions have consequences.
And that's a really important lesson, especially today when we're so quick to judge people from the past by our own standards. Posteguillo encourages us to take a step back, look at the context, and try to understand the human side of even the most controversial figures.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Damn Rome, I want to leave our listeners with a question to think about. If you could go back in time and meet Caesar, what would you say to him? Would you warn him about where his ambition might lead? Would you try to get him to change course?
That's a great question, and I don't think there's an easy answer. Caesar was a product of his time, you know? It's hard to say if he could have or even would have made different choices.
But it's interesting to think about, right, how our actions might play out on the big stage of history. Are we just swept along by events, or do we have the power to change things?
Damn Rome doesn't give us all the answers, but it makes us think about the past, about power and ambition, and about the choices we make that shape our lives.
It's a powerful story, full of ambition, betrayal, love, and loss. And it's just as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago. So if you're looking for a book that will make you think, I definitely recommend Damn Rome by Santiago Posteguillo.
Couldn't agree more. It's a truly captivating read.
Thanks for joining us on this journey through ancient Rome. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Bookercast. We hope you enjoyed diving into it as much as we did. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to hear your thoughts on this episode.
Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this episode with your fellow book lovers. And let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. See you in the next deep dive. Bye for now, and happy reading.